Oh, you're slick. You investors in hate. You Saddams and you Bushes. You Bin Ladens and snakes. You billionaire bullies.
Coming to you live from the studios of KMUD is Heroes and Patriots. Heroes and Patriots is a program about national security, intelligence, and foreign policy. Today is Thursday, July 6, 2023, and we are very glad that all of you have joined us this morning. I'm Mary Massey along with John Sakowicz. Hi, John.
Good morning, Mary, and good morning to our broadcast audience listening in Northern California and to our national and international audience listening to this web stream throughout the world. Just a couple of quick housekeeping items. I want to thank Violet Carosella for helping out as an intern with the show. I also want to plug our August 31st show.
Correct.
With Avi Loeb. Dr. Avi Loeb is the chairman of the astrophysics department at Harvard University, and he is perhaps the nation's top expert on UFOs. He has given testimony to congressional committees, and recently he received a grant from NASA to explore what was thought to be a I don't want to call it a meteor hit off of the coast of Australia, because he says it's not a meteor at all. So we look forward to having Dr. Loeb on the show in late August, and I really can't wait for that show.
Excellent. And of course, he's been on our show before talking about
he's been on
the Congress admitting that we have unexplained aerial phenomenon. Today's program will be archived at kmud.org, as all of our programs, and at our show website, heroespatriots.org, plus social media on YouTube and Facebook. And as she said, Dorothy is our engineer this morning. And I want to remind listeners that they can ask questions of our guest today on the topic of today. The number to call, 707-923-3911. So let's get started. For the next hour, John and I will be speaking with Professor Anna Danylchuk, who is joining us live from Ukraine. Dr. Danylchuk has been presenting a daily video update on the war to the Ukrainian people. She is active on YouTube at Anna from Ukraine, where she posts blogs and real-life human stories from Ukraine and videos about Ukrainian culture and history. She also aims to debunk popular disinformation narratives that are based on communist propaganda. Next to being a YouTuber, Anna works as an associate professor of linguistics at Lezhia Ukrainka Volyn National University, and she is the author of the daily Ukrainian newspaper, The Day. She holds a master's degree in applied linguistics and a PhD in Germanic language. Currently, she is writing her postdoctoral thesis on globalization and English in the European Union. Welcome to the program. May I call you Anna?
Yes, sure. Thank you so much. It is such an honor to be your guest and to be able to speak to the audience. I'm privileged. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I apologize for mispronouncing your last name. Danylchuk, I think is
Danylchuk. That is okay. Everything was correct.
Okay, very good. I don't speak Ukrainian. So we're going to start. Let's look back before the war began and how your life was. You're an associate professor at a university, and you're teaching linguistics and working on your own postdoctoral thesis. Tell us about your life before the war began, and then tell us about what changed and how you were led into this prevalence of stopping propaganda.
Thank you so much for the question. Yes, I will be happy to introduce a little bit to the background, because now it seems that one of the first associations that we have with Ukraine is war, but it has not always been like that. We had our normal living. We were ordinary people. So I was one of well, I have always liked languages and I have liked writing. So I was working as a university teacher. And also I cooperate with the daily Ukrainian newspaper where I wrote articles about culture, cuisine, history, and other interesting things. And also we had a non-governmental organization that dealt with cultural heritage preservation, drawing attention to local tourism, environment, and other beautiful things. Mm-hmm. And honestly, I belong to the generation of people who went to school already in times of independent Ukraine. Mm-hmm. So I knew that, like, we have history of tragedies caused by Russia, Russian Empire, Soviet Union. Under different names, this country constantly caused problems to Ukraine. But I believed that, like, we can preserve normalcy, we can continue living. And first Russian attack on independent Ukraine in 2014 was a surprise for me. And as for the majority of Ukrainians, this war started in 2014 with the annexation of Crimea, which went really smoothly for Russia. And I do like, as like teachers will understand me, I like comparing Russia to a bully. And bullies, they understand pity, but they only understand the language of force, the language of such things. And when we did not react properly to this annexation, they continued to Donbas region. Later on, there were years of like so-called frozen war, but like still lots of people were dying, soldiers were serving, and it was a difficult time for Ukraine. But still, we continued working. I live in a semi-dangerous zone that is the western part of Ukraine, where we continue like teaching, hospitals are working, cafes are working. We try to preserve this normalcy, but once again, you witness that this night, Lviv, which is really close to me, was targeted. 4 people died while sleeping in their houses. They were not military people. They did not even protect any infrastructure objects. They were sleeping in their bedrooms. This was actually like a girl getting ready to her marriage and her mother, for example, among those who died tonight. So, but still, Western, we are able to continue this work, and we try to preserve this normalcy. And before the start of the war, I remember like it was everywhere. It was on the news. Of course, we read the reports from intelligence services. We received the warnings. And sometimes my subscribers of my vlog, they tell me, well, why didn't you evacuate all people and so on? Well, that's impossible. That's a country. We have to protect ourselves. That is actually, Ukraine is the largest country in Europe. We have lots of people. We have lots of things. And we had normalcy bias. My subscribers told me this, introduced me to this phrase, like when you analyze the world from your normal perspective and you realize there is no reason for full-scale war. There is no reason to attack Ukraine because we don't have secret laboratories here. We don't have NATO databases. Like, we are too far away from NATO, even more far away than we want to be. And we did not plan to attack Russia. We tried to live our own independent life. And of course, it was in westward democratic direction, which I would like to stress is nothing new to Ukraine, because back in medieval times, in times of Kiev Rus, we were a part of democratic Western civilization, and that is where we belong to. And we have always protected this choice. And that's the only reason why Russia wants to erase Ukrainian culture, which is an example of democracy and an example that things can change and people can live. But and so I was choosing not to believe that full-scale war is possible. And I remember even like selecting the articles which after long and serious analysis would say like, no, it's not logical. It's not right. The world will not let it happen. There is no reason, and so on. But it all started at dawn, which is like super cruel and once again reminds of terrorist regimes because people are very vulnerable at dawn. in their beds. Even body functions differently at like 4 a.m. And I received a phone call saying it all began, and still you cannot process this information. And then 20 minutes after that, you hear explosions in your own city. Wow. They targeted our airport, our military airport, which is small. It was always provincial airport, but it's so unbelievable when you even think about war. You imagine it will move slowly, I don't know, kilometer by kilometer. We had lots of troops standing at the east of Ukraine, well trained, because during this 8 years after the start of Russian war in Ukraine, we improved the quality of Ukrainian armed forces seriously. But then we realized that it's actually everywhere. It's happening in every Ukrainian city, and that Kyiv is bombed and so on. And it was an experience when your brain disagrees to believe it's possible, when you don't know, you go out in the streets of your city and you don't know what will you see. Will you see Russian tanks? It seems impossible. We are really far away. We're 80 kilometers to European Union border. But who knows? Yesterday, I did not believe a war is possible. So, but from the other point of view, I will tell a weird thing. To some extent, it became easier because when premonitions become your reality and you realize that finally the world sees Russia is a criminal state, Russia attacks Ukraine, Russia invades Ukraine, because back in 2014 and up to 2020, they were able to manipulate, they were able to distort lots of things, and we were actually losing informational war. And here, it was okay, now everybody sees. Now it's no more a fear, it's a reality, and we have to do our best to survive. And another important discovery during these first days of war to me were the fact that Ukrainians don't want to give up. Ukrainians don't want to escape. The president, I was not his fan, but he took everything under control. And for me, it was one of the most important discoveries that we are so united, and we are not going to give our territories, give our people, and negotiate anything, any kind of bad survival.
You're speaking of President Zelensky. You are not a fan of his. Why is that?
At the beginning, but I'm winding up. And this was the moment when we had within our NGO a podcast where we recorded stuff about Ukrainian culture and other things. And I realized it's not that up to date and wanted to record a podcast about Ukraine and what is going on, because on the news everywhere, much information about weapons, about numbers, but not many real stories which describe the spirit of Ukraine. And that's the moment when the guys did not want to do that. They said lots of information online, and I decided to blog. And I had 47 subscribers back at the beginning of war. And now I have 67,000 of them. And this is a really good community of people who are natural, organic to the channel and who really support Ukraine.
Right. John?
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about the Wagner Group. They flipped on their master, and now they're in Belarus. Do you see this as an opportunity for a counteroffensive against Russian troops?
First of all, I would like to stress that I'm not a military expert, but I like to call myself a professional Ukrainian because I follow our news, and for me, all of that is very important. Once again, this coup, or whatever you call it, Wagner and Prigozhin march to Moscow was a total surprise to all Ukrainians. This is something we did not predict as possible. We truly do not understand what stands behind it, because come on, Lukashenko as negotiator does not look natural. He's Putin's puppet and he's not influential. Then another thing that I would like to attract attention of your listeners and perhaps American society, another illustration of how criminal Russian state is. First, they say that Prigozhin will go in prison because he committed a crime and the case is open. Then they say okay, we decided to close this case. On the basis of what? What decision? Was it a coup? What is that? How does this country function? Then once again, Wagner Group is a private army. Everybody knows that. They were used on a number of operations in Middle East and Africa. Then when Russia started losing in Ukraine, the Blitzkrieg plan failed. It was invited to Ukraine. But once again, according to Russian legislation, private armies are forbidden. And then we get a question, who are these people? Then they have problems with mobilization and they invite prisoners. And among Wagner soldiers, there are lots of prisoners who were still serving that period. And they were released from prisons, once again, even without amnesty, to join the troops of Wagner. So everything is so illegal in this story. And when it all began and this march continued, I had some of my followers saying like, oh, maybe Prigozhin is good, like he's going to kill your enemy Putin. No, these are two of Ukrainian enemies because Wagner Group is responsible for lots of crimes they committed in south and east of Ukraine, in Bakhmut, in Mariupol. We saw interviews where Wagner soldiers confessed they were executing Ukrainian children, shooting them in the heads. So this is also Wagner Group. But you are right in your observation that like any conflict, any troubles inside Russia are good for Ukraine because they distract them. They also demonstrate to Russian society and to Russian, I don't want to use this word elites because these are not elites, but those criminals who, oligarchs who rule Russia, they demonstrate that Putin does not control everything. So definitely it was good. And personally, I believe, and many like Ukrainian media believe that this will repeat. Something similar will happen, that this is just the start of chaos that is actually Russian political life.
So my follow-up question is, if the Wagner Group's mutiny is not necessarily an opportunity for counteroffensive, how do you see a strategy for winning the war? Again, realizing that you're not a military expert, but
first, Russians like to exaggerate. For example, Wagner Group, it's not a big army. They don't have hundreds of thousands of soldiers. These are like 35,000 or something like that. Plus, they have already lost a lot of that people.
Right.
And I do like one joke that my subscribers gave me. Like, Russia claimed it is the second largest, strongest army in the world, and today it is the second strongest army in Ukraine after Ukrainian. And there is even a continuation that Russian regular army is the second strongest in Russia after Wagner Group, like a lot of that. Well, I think that in general, if the game or the play was fair, Ukraine has all the chances to win. Why? Because first of all, we have this like moral background. We are protecting our motherland. All the war take place on our territory. We did not invade anyone. We did not attack. Now we are protecting our hospitals, schools, children, and our future, our survival. Then we turned out to be good warriors. And I mean, not just soldiers, but people who were living through blackouts, people who save money. Volunteering is a phenomenon of Ukraine. When our allies give us weapons and provide us trainings, usually they are surprised at how good Ukrainians are. I'm not going to say that Ukrainians are the best. No, we are super motivated. For us, it is a question of survival. It's not the question to pass, Heimer's exam. It's a question, will you survive? For example, these Patriot systems that now are like close to 90% effective. We are able to stop Russian caliber Kinzhal missiles, and you see that very rarely people are now killed in Kyiv. Why? Because Kyiv is super protected. Kyiv is the capital. Russian, orcs often target it, but with the support of our allies, with the weapons that we received, we are able to protect the city. Lviv, for example, does not have that many weapons to protect it. So we have 4 people dead. And it's all like, it seems like Ukrainians are asking for weapons. In reality, Ukrainians are asking for lives saved, because how many people were dying before we actually had these Patriots? Almost like every attack on Kyiv resulted in serious destructions and human losses. For example, if we had Patriot systems back in autumn, blackouts would not be our trouble. We would be able to stop the missiles that destroyed our infrastructure. Russians are continuing this war only because they have lots of people and they are ready to sacrifice as many as needed. They never cared about human life. They've got lots of weapons back from times of Cold War and Soviet Union, and like, they are bad. Okay, they do not target well, but they kill, and they are able to use these missiles for decades. Also, somehow they are able to avoid sanctions and to buy technologies they need. And according to our intelligence services, they are able to provide, to continue doing lots of missiles that then they use against Ukraine. And they are ready to prolong this war, like to exhaust Ukraine, to continue killing our best people. Because in case of Ukraine, these are the best who volunteer, who sacrifice themselves. And in case with Russia,
it's 22 minutes past the hour. If you've just joined the program, this is Heroes and Patriots. And we are broadcasting live from Northern California with our guest who is in Ukraine, Professor Anna Danylchuk. And she will take your questions and comments, and you may call in on topic at 707-923-3911. We hope that you will join the discussion. John, did you have another question?
Yes, I'm looking at our email right now, and a listener would like your read on how likely do you think the scenario is that Russia will use limited, small, tactical nuclear weapons. Do you see the war escalating in that direction?
Thank you. I will finish my previous statement by answering your question. So maybe it does not sound like super popular, but by supporting Ukraine, arming Ukraine, giving us all the weapons we need, this is the best way to stop Russia. Because otherwise, like, when giving us enough to survive but not to win is a reason that can prolong this war long. Concerning Russia, once again, I was a person who did not believe full-scale war is possible without no normal reason. I saw it was illogical, and it turned out to be logical. This war is a trouble for Russia, for Putin's regime. Like, they lose a lot, but they are in. So the same about nuclear weapons. For me, it is definitely a no, but I'm sure Putin is capable of many things. But he cares about his life very much. And I think that very clear messages from our allies and from nuclear countries that if he does something like that, it will be an end to him, will definitely prevent him from doing so. Because once again, Russian president is a bully, Russia is a bully, and inside Russia, it's a very popular message that West is weak, West is afraid, they will not do anything, they will express concerns and pretend that everything is fine, or let's not escalate. Personally, I don't like this address to Ukraine, let's not escalate. A victim cannot escalate. It's like a killer is killing you and asks you not to protest because you escalate and you will get more stabs in your heart. Like, it's absurd. So I do think that he cares about his life. We know that he uses tablets. We know that he has this COVID quarantine before you contact him. We saw Putin talking at the really long tables, keeping distance with people. He's hiding somewhere in bunker. We don't know where. So he cares about his life. He wants to leave. And he must understand that by using nuclear weapons, he commits suicide. And when he gets this message, when he hears it, I think it will be safer for all of us. Because once again, I know many people choose this option to think like it's happening in Ukraine, it's really far away. No, everything is a precedent. Second World War also started with the annexation like of Austria, Czechia, and at the beginning, nations did not want to escalate and were saying like, okay, maybe, who knows, let's sacrifice this piece, let's sacrifice that piece. Ukraine also learned this lesson with Crimea. If we reacted, if we took them away from Crimea when they were still green peoples, maybe they would not continue to Donbass. Plus, today they use Crimea as a logistics hub for their troops, which is one more reason why we have to return Crimea back home to Ukraine.
I have another question here from a listener who asks about the flip side of the war. We just talked about the nuclear, the escalation part of the war. Let's talk about the propaganda war. In your opinion, what are some of the what's some of the cruelest myths that Russia has perpetrated about Ukraine and the Ukrainian people? And make a comment specifically about the whole neo-Nazi element. Is that legitimate, or is that just part of the propaganda war?
Once again, I will start with a joke that my subscribers shared with me, that I don't have to deny there are Nazis in Ukraine, and these are Russian soldiers. And actually, this is true. Russia dominates. I'm afraid it still dominates information space. They have lots of money. They invest in media. They invest in opinions, and they adjust their propaganda beautifully to the needs of a particular country in which they need. They are very dangerous because they know problems, for example, of the United States. They know problems of France. They know problems of, let it be, Denmark. Every country, every normal country has some problems, like every normal person. And they start manipulating these problems. They start conflicts, misunderstandings. And on the basis of that, they develop Russian narratives, trying to describe that country as a solution to that problems and so on. For me, as a Ukrainian, one of the greatest Russian myths or Soviet myths that was a problem, that there is no difference between Ukrainians and Russians, that Ukraine is a part of Russia, a rebellious part of Russia, and it must be back to Russia or back to this monstrous Soviet Union, the fall of which Putin still considers the greatest geopolitical catastrophe. In Ukraine, it is considered one of the greatest victories of the civilized world, democratic world. So also, this story about Nazis, it was really funny when I heard this very first comment on some of serious political meetings. Ukraine has a Jewish president. Zelensky is of Jewish origin. And it was like a phrase that Ukrainians have a Jewish Russian-speaking president, and Russia describes them as Nazis. But I have to clarify one thing. For a Russian, a Nazi is any citizen of former Soviet republics who does not want back to Soviet Union and who does not want to say that Russian cultural heritage, Russian language is the main thing for me, who wants to preserve his cultural heritage, his language, and so on. Russia actually does a lot of evil to indigenous people and other peoples that live on its territory. They do not let them develop national languages, preserve national traditions. By the way, do you know there are no Ukrainian cultural centers, not any, on the territory of Russia, when there are millions of Ukrainians living. So they deny the very existence of Ukrainian culture, of Ukrainian, they steal our history. And honestly, it all reached this peak of absurd, because you hear Putin on one of his last press conferences, just before the coup, he was saying there is no Ukraine, that's why we came to return back Russian territories. But there are Nazi Ukrainians who are fighting for that territory, but this territory must be returned to Russia because there is no Ukraine. So there is no Ukraine, but there are Ukrainians fighting for Ukraine. And it's all really absurd, but it's tragic because there are many countries that were dependent on Soviet Union or were dependent on Russia, and they don't want to look deeper and they don't want to analyze, and they prefer this authoritarian approach when like there are zones of influence, and Ukraine belongs to Russian zone of influence. What is that? Ukraine, once again, is the largest country in Europe, a country that is known for thousands of years, a country that has its language, has its people, and shares lots of democratic values. And of course, we have some problems, but we are working on them. We talk about them. And Russia is an example of a Nazi regime. It must have a different name because like we had Nazis, now we have Russies, so whatever we call them. They hate other nations. They are looking for enemies everywhere. They invade countries, not only Ukraine, Georgia, Chechnya. They fuel up conflicts in different parts of the world. They describe Russians as the best. They demand like everyone to learn their culture, not their language, and so on. So doesn't that resemble Nazi?
Yeah. I have another question here, and then it's Mary's turn.
Well, I want to take a brief break here in a second.
One more question, and it's about the role of women in fighting. Here in the United States, women have only gradually been introduced into combat units. First as jet fighter pilots and maybe as captains of Navy fighting ships, but you rarely see women on the front lines in ground combat. And in Israel, of course, that's not true. Women have been part of the fighting force in Israel for a long time. Talk to our audience about the role of women in this war.
This is one more thing that will show the difference between Ukrainian and Russian society for those who still doubt. Historically, women played a very important role in Ukrainian society. And if you look at our fairy tales, our national songs, folk songs, you will see that in the majority of cases, it is a husband who is worried, will he return back home in time? Then Ukraine is famous for Cossacks, who were warriors, very strong men. But at the same time, they were spending lots of time in military campaigns, and their women were responsible for family business, farming, trade. So we have lots of princesses and queens who were influential. And in general, I'd say that in comparison with some European societies, especially medieval societies, we did not have Inquisition and other things. Women lived more or less comfortably here. And so they were always active in social life. And of course, when war came to Ukraine, they became active first in volunteering. And then they started joining Ukrainian armed forces. And now Ukrainian army is trying to reform itself according to NATO standards and other examples of European armies. And we know that I have even read some research, Scandinavian research, which states that if there are more women in the armies, they tend to be more comfortable for people with more positive attitudes and respect. Because Russian army is famous for Dedovshchina, which is a phenomenon when elderly soldiers demonstrate disrespect and bullying, classical bullying once again to younger soldiers. We don't have that in Ukraine. We have very much support, and what I feel on front lines, people know what is the cost of life and support. So now there are I'm afraid to make a mistake, but 40,000 of Ukrainian women that serve in Ukrainian armed forces. Of course, some of them are on typical administrative positions, but there are close to a couple of thousand who are on front lines in hot zones. These are their decisions. Like in Ukraine, women only of some specific professions like medical can be mobilized, but in general, lots of women want to. Lots of women choose it as their profession. By the way, we now know that women are better snipers than men. I'm sorry.
No, that's true. Actually, that's true.
And we witnessed that. We have proof. That's not a theory. That's practice in Ukraine. Also, there are women who are heads of tank crew, for example. They are very good at education. They are very good at some. Oh my God, how do you call it? Like not intelligence service, but scouting. Like when you scouting or something. When you have to yeah. Women are respected and treated as equal. And I'm really glad that even our president and our top military men, for example, when they greet with the various days or when they thank defenders, they always use two forms, because in our language we have feminine and masculine genders, and they always address defenders like she defender, he defender, and so on, to state the importance of women's role in that. And I'm sure, like, if everything goes right and we win and we continue moving in that direction of reforms, more and more women will join, because army will be a comfortable environment.
Right. It's 37 minutes past the hour, and I would like to reintroduce our guest. If you've just joined in to Heroes and Patriots, we are speaking today to Anna Danylchuk, and she is a daily YouTuber, I believe, which gives updates on the war, but also talks about the history and culture of Ukraine. She works as an associate professor of linguistics at Lesia Ukrainka Volyn National University, and she is the author of The Day. She holds a master's degree in applied linguistics and a PhD in Germanic language. Currently, she is writing her postdoctoral thesis on globalization and English in European Union. You know, Anna, I have to ask, do you ever feel threatened by exposing the truth through your vlog? Have you been harassed, followed, threatened for what you're putting out there about Russia and the truth? Do you feel safe?
Yeah, that's a good question. Do you feel targeted?
Well, a question, do you feel safe in Ukraine, is like, no. I don't. But the problem is that we quickly adapt. And actually, this is bad, because I wouldn't like war and other dangers to become like our normalcy. And honestly, what I often tell my subscribers, for example, in Ukraine, we don't plan ahead. And if you ask me, what do I plan for September? I don't know. Will they blow up Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, for example? I don't know. Will they target my city or my house? I cannot guarantee you that. So we typically plan something for tomorrow, and everything is very unpredictable. And this is very bad, actually, for human psychology and for the quality of your life, when you cannot predict what can happen next. Once again, I live in semi-safe zone that is far away from Russia. If I were close to Russia, where you have real Russian soldiers walking the streets, of course, the story would be different for me. And I know that many people were killed or tortured. And by the way, as an answer to those who advise surrender, or maybe what's so bad? Maybe you could have been occupied and then somehow decided. Russians had lists of people they want to kill, they want to execute. They actually did it in Kherson, they did it in Mariupol. So if something similar would happen to my region, of course I would be on a list. I realize that. Wow. But I'm lucky to live far away from the Russian border, and I hope no one will let them here. And I will personally fight for that if needed. Yeah. Of course, I do receive some comments, or I have some trolls that come and comment. They try to offend you, or they try to threaten you, but I'm not afraid of that. Why? Because my countrymen in their cities have real Russian soldiers walking, destroying dams, killing, and I think it would be very stupid of me to be angry or distracted with comments. So
right.
and when you have like when the existence of your country, its culture, its language, its people, ordinary things that you value is in danger, like you change your attitude to many things. And I like talking, and I'm very grateful, by the way, to you and audience, to my subscribers who want to know more about Ukraine, who care about the things happening here.
Well, we're very grateful for you as well. And it's interesting. Mary and I operate with a lot of autonomy on our show. And we've been doing public radio since 2007, and we have a YouTube channel and podcast and syndicate in the past to Al Jazeera and a bunch of other places. And it's interesting that you're one of the few guests who has come to us from outside of our little circle. You were actually recommended to us by a former general manager of KMUD, this station. And I'm wondering, I'm thinking to myself, that's pretty good. Here we are in Redwood country in Northern California. And a former general manager says, you have to have this woman on your show. And she's the boss. She's the boss. So we listen. And here you are. But it begs the question, how did you get out into the public consciousness? What do you do to use social media and other technology to get your message out, to get the truth out about the plight of the Ukrainian people, how they're fighting for the motherland, how they're fighting for victory, how they're suffering? How did you come into the public consciousness?
Thank you so much. Ukrainians for a very long period of time were hidden behind the Iron Curtain, and I do realize that like Russia did a lot to hide us and to pretend that we're just like Russians, and it did to Belarus and lots of other nations. And many Ukrainians were not known to the world, and some associations that people had with us was like Chernobyl. Once again, a tragedy. Like if you speak, Chernobyl, Ukraine, and now like the world knows what is Ukraine, where is Ukraine, and like I believe like everyone heard. Very often inside the country we say like we'd wish not to have this kind of popularity, like we would not like this kind of limelight, if it's possible to say so. And I never intended to blog. Actually, I was writing, and I love writing for the newspaper. I was a co-author of some books on history and culture, and I treated this seriously, and like YouTube, Instagram, it was like for fun. But when the war started, I really felt like there's so many stories happening daily, so many stories of bravery, of human spirit that are not on the headlines, that are not connected with, I don't know, capturing a tank. It was just like, I don't know, I saw this video of really old ladies on the occupied territory by Russians, and they were shouting at Russian soldiers and telling them to put seeds into the pockets so that when Ukrainians come, kill them, bury them, flowers will grow and there will be some use of them.
That's my kind of woman.
I like that.
Yeah, and I felt like, oh my God, they are so heroic. It now sounds funny, but these Russian soldiers whom they advised it, they had guns in their heads, and they could literally execute these ladies in a couple of seconds. Yeah. But they were continuing saying that because they were shouting like those, like, you know, sometimes elderly ladies that can be very angry with, and they were shouting and they were saying it. And I felt, are they heroes? And they will not get on these stories. And I started vlogging, and I once again had 47 subscribers because I used YouTube for, I don't know, makeup tutorials to watch other people. And then I started sharing stories, and I felt pretty therapeutic. And I was not like, once again, now we are more or less adapted to war. We adapted to this.
Right.
I hate saying this, but that's the reality.
Right.
And then it was just like, and I felt like, oh my God, 300 people watched me, 500. And I was super grateful for this. I have also promised myself that after we win, and there will be wars and conflicts in the world, I will always be attentive, and I will always choose the side. I will never be like neutral or, okay, it's happening somewhere far away on the other continent, because that's an obligation, like at least to know the truth or the side, because just like with Ukraine and Russia, I think it's impossible to be neutral in this case when you witness like everything. And I started speaking, focusing on real life stories of people and demonstrating Ukrainian spirit. Then I realized with that community, and I have totally natural, not advertisement community on my channel, they were asking questions, inspiring future videos. And I started sharing about culture and history and other things, because Ukraine is not limited to war. Right. And also I realized people don't know a lot about us. But it does not make me angry. It makes me inspired, because we were also lazy, not speaking about ourselves, not speaking in English or anything else during this 30 years of renewed independence. And I feel so privileged that I'm able to tell stories about the country I love. I honestly love this country. So I think what makes people join our community on YouTube, subscribe, Anna from Ukraine. Very simple. Like I did not think much about the nickname. It was spontaneous. And I am very grateful for this opportunity to share about my country. And I'm always honest. I am subjective, because that's a vlog. That's my story. That's the way I see it. But I never like manipulate opinion. I can make mistakes, and then I tell my subscribers that, well, I've changed my attitude or something. But we develop this like connection and friendship. And this is, by the way, what keeps many Ukrainian people alive. The understanding that the United States stand with us, the understanding that many other countries support us in thoughts, in prayers, in HIMARS and Leopards. All of that means a lot, and that is another great discovery of this war, like that we're not alone.
Well, I'm going to make sure that we get a copy of this tape to some of our colleagues in places like CNN and MSNBC. I think you would be a perfect guest. You're young, you're articulate, you're humanistic. So many of the guests you see on the Ukraine-Russian war are military experts, and they're mostly men. They're mostly retired military, and it's a very alpha kind of slant to the war. And I think you bring a younger perspective, you bring a woman's perspective, and you bring a humanistic perspective. So I think you'd be a fabulous guest on national media here in the United States. So
thank you so much.
We'll do our best.
I will be grateful to use any opportunity to remind people, because it's so important to see that behind each attack there are human lives. And even in the zones that are semi-safe, I can observe lives of my students, how they change. I saw how hospitals operate during blackouts. There are so many unpredictable things that you don't notice, and they happen. So war has so many different directions apart from this front line. So many stories that cannot be forgotten.
It was a human story that changed my perspective on the war, Anna. I didn't want to see the United States in another endless war like we've had in Iraq and Afghanistan. And speaking about Vietnam, that was yet another misadventure by the United States. And 3 years ago, when this trouble started between Russia and Ukraine, I thought to myself, the last thing the United States needs is another endless war. And then I started reading some of the press about the more human stories about Russia bombing civilian targets. And there was a photograph that made me cry. And it was a woman who was a pregnant woman from a maternity ward who was dying on a stretcher.
Yeah.
And the medics, the doctors, were trying to deliver the baby and at least save the baby if they couldn't save the mother. And as it so happened, tragically, both mother and child died. And it was that was the turning point for me. That's when I said to myself, this Russian aggression is very, very wrong, and the United States needs to do something. So it was a human story that caused me to change my mind. And that's where people like you come in.
Yes, thank you so much for feeling that, for taking time. Once again, I'm really grateful to those people who read the news, who watch the photos, because to be able to see this, to feel this, you have to connect. And when you connect, there are so many stories. And I feel like from one point of view, many of them are inspiration. Others leave you in total sadness. And I don't want them to become like statistics, because that's exactly what Russia wants. That's how they spoke about soldiers even during Second World War. Like Stalin used to say, if you kill one, that's a tragedy. If you kill millions, that's statistics. And no, this is something that, well, actually at the bottom of this Ruski Mir psychology, they don't treat people as individuals, as that every life is actually the world dying. So
Anna, we have about 5 more minutes. And for those who would like to begin viewing your vlog and or reading the day, your newspaper, how might they do so? And what do you hope from America to learn and understand about this war?
Thank you so much. Well, first of all, my most active platform where I vlog daily is YouTube. And there you can find me as Anna from Ukraine, which is really simple. And typically on YouTube, you can find links to my Instagram, to my Twitter, and even to my Facebook. Also, today I have joined Threads, a new social network.
Okay.
But typically I like YouTube because it allows like 8-10 minutes. And during these videos, I'm able to tell more. And I want to say that Ukrainian people are very grateful to American people. And you have celebrated the 4th of July recently and joined to these greetings. And you are an example of freedom and democracy, and that after lots of troubles, you can actually achieve freedom and be that example. And, don't trust Russians. Don't believe that such country as Ukraine does not exist. We do exist, and we want to be in Europe, in our own world. We did not attack or invade anyone. We protect our land. And to those who doubt, I ask, imagine a world where Ukraine loses. First of all, crimes must be punished. And it's really difficult to live with such unpunished crimes as Bucha, Mariupol, and lots of mass murders they commit. And also this will be a dangerous precedent to other authoritarian regimes that are watching very carefully what is happening in Ukraine. So we must win for the sake of good, for the sake of future, and for the sake of democracy. Don't be afraid of Russian collapse, because Russia is already a trouble. Russia is already a danger. Russia is already a terrorist state. What can get worse than it is today? Ukrainians die in hundreds daily. And if they continue, they will not stop in Ukraine. They will continue. Believe me, they will find narratives. They will find explanations. And they will find weak politicians who will say, well, maybe we should not escalate. That's not the answer. In Ukraine, we have a proverb, and I'm finishing. Unpunished evil grows. So we have to punish this evil. And as some of my Russian subscribers, they also exist, say, we have to liberate Russia.
Well,
and I want to say, I just went to YouTube here. It couldn't be easier. So for our listening audience, Anna from Ukraine could not be easier.
Yeah.
Anna from Ukraine, Your last post 23 hours ago already has 18,000 views. So good job.
And I'm going to post soon. Yeah.
Good job.
Thank you so much for joining us live from Ukraine. It's been a delight to learn more about you and certainly to learn more about Ukraine. And as things develop, perhaps you will join us again and update us and let us know what's going on. And please do keep safe, please.
Thank you so much. I hope the day when it is safe to invite people to Ukraine comes soon. After we win, there are many things to discover here. And so far, every Ukrainian is grateful for your support. You keep us.
God bless you, Anna. God bless you.
Thank you so much for joining us. Our guest this last hour has been Professor Anna Danylchuk from Lutsk, Ukraine. She is active on YouTube at Anna from Ukraine, where she posts vlogs and real-life human stories from Ukraine and videos about Ukrainian culture and history. She also aims to debunk popular disinformation narratives that are based on communist propaganda. Next to being a YouTuber, Anna works as an associate professor of linguistics at Legia Ukrainska National University and is the author of the daily Ukrainian newspaper, The Day. She holds a master's degree in applied linguistics and PhD in Germanic language, and she is currently writing her postdoctoral thesis on globalization and English in the European Union. That has been our show for today. We thank her so much for being our guest for this last hour. And John, we will be back in the first Thursday of August.
Correct.
And the fifth Thursday in August. You want to tell our guests about Avi Loeb for the last Thursday in August?
Just really looking forward to having Dr. Loeb back. And by the way, he is so approachable. He speaks in plain English.
Yes.
He's authored something like 700 peer-reviewed science papers. He is director of the Galileo project at NASA. He's chairman of the astrophysics department at Harvard University. But when he goes before congressional committees exploring the subject of UFOs, he can make even a congressman understand. So he speaks in plain English, and he's great. And guess what? They're out there. They're out there.
They are indeed. So we will have an updated show. He was on our show back in, I think, March or February. And
we're very lucky to have him back because he's very popular now. He's been on all the network news and CNN and MSNBC a bunch of times now. C-SPAN has devoted hours to his testimony in front of Congress, and we're just lucky to have him back. He's the date of our show, which I think is August 31st. 31st.
So last Thursday in August.
Also coincides with the launch of his new book. So he'll be talking about his new book, and he's already given us some complimentary copies.
Right over there.
Yep, that we hope to be sharing with the station. And just like I bought a box of books in the past to give out as thank you gifts to new members and such, I'm thinking about buying some more books from Dr. Loeb. The name of the book is Interstellar: The Search for Extraterrestrial Life in the Future and Our Future in the Stars. And I'm holding an edited proof. It's published by Mariner Press. And again, we're very lucky to have Avi Loeb back on August 31st.
So we hope you'll join us the first and fifth Thursday of August. Until then, have a great afternoon, and thank you for tuning in.
And thank you for supporting your community station, KMUD, by becoming a member or an underwriter. Thank you so much for supporting this station.